Okay, and we should officially now be recording.
Great.
Alrighty. I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. So first and foremost, welcome everyone to our series, Skill Up, How to Get Hired with Your Skill Set, an event program series designed to equip our students with their understanding of their career readiness skills. My name is Alyssa Laskowski. I am a career engagement partner on the SNHU Career Services team. And I am joined by two of our associate deans from our liberal arts and social sciences programs, Dr. Karen Wilkinson and Dr. Lamont Tosh. And of course, our employer guest today, Matt DePiero from Saffron Defense and Space, who will all be introducing themselves later on today. And so today
Right.
we will be highlighting the career readiness skills known as verbal communication. And our intention today is to help students understand the value of having this crucial skill and understand how to translate what they're learning in their degree programs into the workplace. So we'll begin the session with a quick overview of today's career readiness competency. Then you'll hear some engaging insights from our academic deans, followed by an open Q&A with our employer guests, and then we'll conclude with action items and some next steps for all of you. So let's get started by first introducing our SNHU Career Services team and all of our available resources. So individuals with accessibility needs and accommodations may reach out to the following offices. Any online students can reach out to OAC at snhu.edu or call 866-305-9430. If you're a campus student, you can reach out to CAC at snhu.edu or call 603-644-3118. And if you're a staff or faculty member, please reach out to hr@snhu.edu. And a request for live captioning or live ASL interpreting requires at least 3 weeks of advance notice. So current online SNHU students and alumni are encouraged to connect with our dedicated SNHU Career Services team for career guidance and help anytime. You can follow us on all of our social media platforms, and you can view our central virtual career center, Career 360. On our virtual Career Center site, Career 360, you'll be able to browse and explore our career readiness page. Here you'll find various resources and career videos related to upskilling your career readiness skills. For example, each of these series sessions are recorded, and once they are completed, they will be added directly to this page for you to view and watch back at any time. So, what exactly is career readiness? It's the process of developing the skills and knowledge needed to be successful in the workplace. It's a framework that helps students and alumni prepare for their careers. Career readiness skills are often called career readiness competencies, are the skills, experiences, and attributes that prepare you for a successful career. A competency is a skill, task, strength, or personal quality that allows you to do a specific job or role well. So today's highlighted competency is verbal communication. And verbal communication is defined as being able to clearly and effectively exchange information, ideas, facts, and perspectives. So those who excel in verbal communication skills, for example, employ active listening, communicate in a clear and organized manner, and ask appropriate questions. So let's explore this important skill and competency even further. And so now I will turn it over to our deans, Karen and Lamont.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dr. Karen Wilkinson, and I am the Associate Dean of Undergrad and Graduate Communication at Southern New Hampshire University. I'm excited to be with you today and talk to you a little bit about verbal communication. So as contemporary communicators, we often think of verbal communication as the opportunity to use language to convey information in both a clear and concise manner. However, there's a bit more to the story. Next slide, please. Verbal communication not only refers to the way that we think of messaging through words, but includes active listening as well. Quite often when we think about verbal communication, we think about talk, yak, how we talk to one another, but there's more to it. There's active listening as well. Next slide, please. Quite often when I share this with my communication scholars in our classroom at Southern New Hampshire University, they're like, wait, what? You want me to speak clearly, share information clearly and concisely, but I have to listen as well? Absolutely. There's two parts to it. It's not just the giving of information, it's the ability to receive it as well. Next slide, please. But here's the catch. What if I told you that you are already a skilled and effective verbal communicator? All of you are communicating in such a strong and proficient way, and you probably don't even realize it. Today, I'm going to help you kind of unwrap that and realize how strong you already are in your craft and let you feel a bit of confidence. I hope that this helps you build some confidence and feel strongly in the abilities that you already have. Next slide, please. So let's get started. When we think about verbal communication skills, I try to group them into 3 situations. First off, one-on-one conversations. Oh my goodness, we have them every day. Think about conversations with a family member or a friend. Think about your annual performance review. If you work somewhere where you have to have a one-on-one conversation about how you're doing in your job, you may have new employee training where someone comes in and tells you, you're supposed to do this in the workplace, you're supposed to do that. That's a one-on-one conversations. And if you're in sales, a lot of times you might have a meeting with a client. So typically we have one-on-one conversations all the time. You may speak to your children or to your spouse or to your partner and share information. So what I would like for you to do, if you haven't already, go up to the top, click on the chat and open the chat window. I'll do it as well because I see I don't have mine open, but I'm opening it right now. And what I'd like for you to do is go in and enter your most recent one-on-one. You can say with my daughter, with my husband, with my spouse, with my boss. Let's just think about a one-on-one that you've most recently had in your life. And you can add that. So I'm asking Dr. Lamont Tashi, we work together constantly, if she'll look at the chat and just see, I'm seeing some things pop up. My mom, my coworker. What are you seeing, Lamont?
Yes, a lot of responses. I hope everybody hears me well. Again, my mom with my husband, my brother, my coworkers, my daughter, my sister. So it's family members and also people from our work environment.
Absolutely. So we
With
know that we're constantly having these one-on-one interpersonal conversations. So at times we need to craft them a little bit stronger. And we're going to talk about ways to improve our conversation, but we know that we're already actively involved in these one-on-one conversations through interpersonal communication. Okay, next slide, please. In addition to interpersonal communication, think about group conversations. This is another way that we converse with one another. Quite often we have these conversations. Now, these are not just one-on-ones. These conversations are more than 2 people, but less than a large, expansive audience. Think about sitting around the dinner table at night. This is one of the things I think about sometimes when I think about group conversations is my family always sit around the dinner table. Oh my goodness, we had these tremendous conversations at night. We'd take a topic and we would just break it apart and all of us would talk about it. Those are group conversations. When I worked currently I work remotely, but when I worked in the workplace, in the physical workplace, we had break rooms. We would go into the break room. Several of us would sit around together and have a snack, would have these friendly chats with our coworkers. These are group conversations. Also, think about brainstorming sessions. Have you ever come together with your colleagues, kind of like in this picture here to the left, where you think about a topic and think, what's the best way that I can try to resolve a situation moving forward? You brainstorm, you think about things together. And then also, if you have children, you may think about planning committees your own. Many of us are involved over the years. Now, I'm not recently, but in the past, I was always involved in community meetings on sessions or youth sporting events for my daughter. So there's a lot of conversations that we have in group environments. So what I'd like to ask you to do as well is join the chat once again, if you don't mind. I'd love for you to share. Let's think about this. Sometimes we're involved in positive group conversations. Sometimes we're involved in negative group conversations. You can choose either one that you want to highlight, but I'd like for you to tell me why it was positive or why it was negative. Now, you don't have to type a story. You can just say, think about it. If it was positive, was it because the person who led the session came into the session with an organized agenda? If it was negative, was it because people talked on top of each other, because people were rude? You know, we've all had these experiences. I can tell you I've had both. And I just would ask that you would, and I'd ask that Dr. Tosh, if she'll please just let me know what she's seeing. I'm not seeing anything pop up here in the chat, but if you guys can share negative because it was a lot of yelling. Oh my goodness, I can imagine. The group session was very informative. So that would have been positive. So I'm going to ask Dr. Tosh if she can tell us what she's seeing as well.
Yes, I also see that it was positive because we talk about strength. Somebody just mentioned negative. Depends, somebody says that it depends on how group is going that day. Positive because everyone listened. You actually mentioned active listening, right? Positive with my kids at dinner, so the context.
Love
Negative
that.
because other members became isolated, or that could go back to not being heard, right? Planning
Yes,
a birthday party, positive. Negative because it was conducted virtual, could feel tension between certain individuals. And interesting, right? We will be talking about how you feel that tension in the virtual environment. What clues are you getting? Conversation was positive because group members let everyone talk and listen. And again, listening, active listening. Somebody
absolutely.
said, oh, thank you so much. I'm trying to keep up with all the readings. I
No,
don't
and
read
I'm
that
seeing
fast.
actually, you're doing fantastic, Lamont. One of the things I'm seeing here, I love this from Tracy. She said positive input from all members in a constructive and positive way. So I just kind of wanted you to think about it. You know, we say, you know, become verbal communicators, but actually you're already communicating in a verbal way. So next slide, please. Great job, Lamont. So lastly, I'm not going to ask you to put this into the chat because we have a limited amount of time here, but I want you to do a reflection exercise with me. This last grouping of verbal communication is actually one where we think about public speaking. Now, one of the things about a public speaker is that they are able to share information with a large group of people. And the reason that, to me, public speaking is truly so phenomenal is that you're able to give the same message to every person in the group at the same time. What if you had to go and tell that same message to each person one after one? Well, of course, you're going to not tell the same story. You're going to kind of vary it. It's not going to be exactly the same. So it's so important to be able at times to share a group message to a large group of people at once. We hear in lectures and presentations and speeches, and we're just going through a new administration. We're seeing a lot of speeches at this time. But what I'd like for you to do is just take 1 minute in your mind to think about a strong motivational speaker that you've heard. What are one or two words that make you think of that person? I'm willing to share with you what I think of. Norman Vincent Peale was a tremendous motivational speaker for me when I was younger in my life. And one of the things that I felt about him, and I'll use a couple words. When he spoke, I felt like he spoke from his heart. He had integrity. He believed in what he was saying. And so think about, I'm not going to ask you to put it into the chat, because we're trying to limit our time here, but just as a reflective exercise, think about things that make a motivational speaker empowering to you, motivate you, make you actually want to get up and do what they're telling you to do. That's something that's very important, that we understand how these individuals are able to motivate us. So next slide, please. Okay, so great news. One of the things that I can tell you is it's demonstrated in the chat. Each of you is already an accomplished verbal communicator. Kudos. So I clap for you and just want to let you know that as you're already strong in verbal communication, I would say now let's work together to kind of look at some ways to polish what we do, how we can move forward and be a little bit stronger in our craft. So next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a scenario. Let's get started. Let's work on a little bit of polishing here. So one of the things that's so important when we're having verbal communication efforts is to consider our audience. You want to think about your word choice, the volume of your voice, and the tone in which you share information. So let me tell you a little scenario here. My name is Karen Wilkinson, and I am the mayor of SNHUville, SNHUville. And one of the things that I'm going to do today is work with you to build a playground. One of our citizens in Snewville has offered a plot of property for free for the town to enjoy. And what we're going to do is build a playground. Now, I have 2 verbal communication sessions coming up this week. The first one is with a group of kindergartners. I'm going to have them as a focus group, and they're going to tell me exactly what they want to see in this playground. They're going to tell me what toy, what they want to play on, what they want to jump and slide on, all of that great information that I need from a kindergartner. Next, later in the week, I'm going to meet with potential donors. I'm going to speak to professionals, individuals who have businesses within the community who might want to bring in a slide and have it named in the honor of their organization, or someone who might have enough money to pay for the whole playground. Now, what I'd like to ask you to do is either join us in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to be called on and speak out. You're more than welcome to. I'd like for you to share what's the difference and how you would engage with the second group as opposed to first group. So if I'm talking the first group, I'm like, what do you want to see? What are you excited about? But now I'm going to be speaking to a second group. These are business professionals. I certainly can't use that jazz hands and do all that to try to, get them motivated in the same way that I could a younger kindergarten age audience. So what are some things that you would do a bit differently? Would you change your word choice? Would you change your volume? What about, would you speak a bit more professionally? Would you stand a little more erect? Would you bring in humor? Things like that. So let's see.
Yeah,
Uh,
there are some
Go ahead,
hands
Lamont.
raised. Yeah, there are some hands. I just don't. Do you see some hands raised? We can start giving people
I
who raise
love
their
this that they
hands.
said the
There's
first group could be more animated. Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead, Lamont.
Pamela is raising hand. Pamela, do you want to unmute yourself and talk? Pamela?
I'm seeing simple and to the point. Absolutely. Beautiful work, because it's so important that we talk to our audience in the way in which they receive information. So simple and to the point. I love that. Second group, much more professional. Absolutely. Oh, someone cannot unmute. I'm sorry.
If you raise your hand, I can unmute you.
Perfect. I do agree that you have to work really hard to keep kindergarten children engaged. So that's super important. Okay, so we see the difference here. So let's move on to the next slide. All right, and it's so important that you set a hook. And this is something that we talk about in communication constantly, is being able to hook your audience. Now, I want to share this with you. Many experts say you have to hook in the first 30 seconds. I feel like you have a little bit longer, but that's just me. And I've worked in communication for over 40 years. And I do think that if you can hook someone in the first minute, you're okay. So look to the right of the screen and you'll see these are ways to hook your audience. And what a hook actually means is that you let them have an interest in what you're talking about. Sometimes it'll be a historical quote. Sometimes it'll be a catchy phrase, a pop culture reference. Think about, just do it. Let's do it. Something, anything to kind of make them feel a little more pop culture, a little more. What if you said, imagine a world where there was no fighting or no war? And then also think about a what if scenario. At the beginning of this session, we said, what if I told you that everyone in this session was already a verbal communicator? So just think there are ways to engage your audience and to kind of help hook them and bring them into your conversation. Next slide, please. And then at this time, I'd like for you to listen to this very brief, it's only like 13 seconds, very brief segment by former President Franklin D. Roosevelt. And this is his first inauguration speech in 1933. And then I just want you to think about this, these aspects, being able to choose your words carefully, speak clearly and confidently. And confidence means that you believe in the message that you're sharing and remain concise and focused in what you're sharing. So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to click the arrow here, if Alyssa's going to do
I can
that.
do it
Alyssa, I'm
for you,
going to
Karen.
let you do that, my friend.
All
Thank
right.
you.
No problem. Here we go.
Okay, and so hopefully you felt that when FDR was sharing that message, he was confident in what he was sharing and that it was concise and clear. Next slide, please. And then, as we talked about earlier, verbal communication is not just speaking. There's actually a part to it that's called active listening. And this is a part where you take on a role. And a lot of times our communication scholars will say, well, I have a question. What's the difference between listening and active listening? Well, let me share that with you. When you're active listening, you are a part of the conversation. So you're attentive. It's easy to sit here and be, docile, not really listen, but we want to be attentive. We want to hear. And we're going to talk in a little bit with a career professional who can actually tell you how important it is for you to be engaged in those conversations, to be attentive, to show that you actually have an interest in what that person has to say, to ask open-ended questions, to request clarifications. You might say, I'm not sure if I heard you correctly. Could you explain this to me? You may summarize it and say, did I hear that correctly? And then also to show empathy. If someone's sharing a message with you about a plight or a situation, it's really important to show that you have understanding and compassion for what they're sharing. And then also to have open body language. If I have my arms like this, it certainly doesn't show that I'm open to conversation. So I think that's very important that we understand that it's not just the speaking component, but it's that active listening component as well. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we have to remember is, this is a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it's one of my favorite quotes because I think at times, and if you look at these faces, they're all kind of different distortions, different looks, but what you are or what you are doing shouts so loudly in my ears that I cannot hear what you're saying. So always think your nonverbal communication is so important, because if you're acting like if you're sitting in a meeting, you're rolling your eyes, you're acting disgruntled, that can take away from anything positive that you're trying to share. So at this time, I'm going to hand the session over to my dear colleague, Dr. Lamontage, and thank you so much for allowing me to share with you. It's been my honor and it's been my joy to speak with each of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you very much for giving me a word. My name is Lemontash. I'm Associate Dean of Social Sciences here at SNHU. And I'm going basically to continue everything that Karen already mentioned. Can we go to the next slide, please? When we communicate verbally, when we communicate in person in front, and there will be many different situations, do you know, we're trying to deliver some message, right? Our goal is to communicate a message. Now, studies show that 93% of our communication comes from nonverbal cues. And in this section, I will talk a little bit about nonverbal aspects of communication. Words are very important, but very often it's not always what we say, but how we say it. And here we're talking about body language, facial expressions, voice tone, gestures. All of this can make huge difference. I didn't put here, there was a cartoon in Russian where husband and wife are arguing with each other. So pretend like husband and wife are arguing with each other, and wife is yelling at husband, how dare you talk to me like that? And poor husband responds, honey, I didn't say a word. And she yells back at him, but don't speak to me with your face. Sometimes our faces can speak louder than our words, and what we communicate without even saying word could be as important, or based on statistics, even more important than words. So this is something to pay attention, to be mindful for. Next slide, please. This is just a quick activity. We don't have to spend too much time for it, but think about 100 different ways you can say I'm excited. Or I'll give you another example. You will ask me, let's say you knew that I attended some event. And Karen, for example, Karen, you can ask me like, Karen asked me, what do you think about this event? Now think about these reactions. Yeah, I was excited. I was excited. Oh, I was excited. I told you the same words, but I communicated to you completely different meaning, right? And your idea about my experience with that event was completely different with the same words. Next slide, please. This is a very short video. Before we watch it, let me tell you something about it. I came across this video in social media and I came across it. I put just screenshots in 4 different languages. I'm sure there are other languages. I have to admit, I am obsessed with this video. I've watched it unhealthy amount of time, but there is a reason for that. There is a reason for my obsession. Watch it carefully. Karen showed you a wonderful video of the president who delivered a speech. This is a 4 years old. This is a person who did not study in schools. Watch how she delivers her message. Pay attention to her body language, the words she chooses, her facial expressions. Try to ignore the fact that she's so cute. That helps, but that is not the only factor. And think about all these elements that we mentioned. Reading the audience, adjusting your voice tone and your body language to the audience, making persuasive message. Karen also mentioned you all have it in you. You don't have to be president to have this capacity. If 4 years old, and I made like a habit of reading the comments that people were writing, and again, I was reading them in 4 languages. I'm sure there are more. And I'm not joking. This is a fact. Thousands of people were asking the same thing. They wanted to know more. They wanted to hear more. She's 4 years old. Can we click on that button? It's a very short video. Now, she's not a president, but watch how she did. She knew her audience. She hooked them up. You're all wonderful. We all like to hear how wonderful we are. You're all wonderful. But then she lowers her voice. Again, she uses her voice tone, right? She lowers her voice. She pauses. That little chubby finger goes up and she spells every word one by one. One little boy. And thousands of people want to know who is that one little boy. They want to know everything about him. You should have read the comments. I made a habit of reading the comments. People were demanding a freedom of speech in America to let this girl talk. Now we can move to the next slide, please. So again, depending on again, I speak with a lot of hands, right? And again, this could be also culturally very different. Keep in mind that facial expression, gesture, space, all these nonverbal cues can be perceived very differently in a different cultural context, and they're crucial in building relationships, right? So whenever you are, and these are just some examples of the situations, you could be in the video meeting. You could be in some business negotiation with people from different countries. You could be making a presentation to the very diverse industry, right? You could be having some client. When I say cultural, I don't mean necessarily international. It could be within the same countries sometimes, right? There are huge generational differences. Think about North and South. People have different perceptions of what serious speech looks like. Think about eye contact. Do you hear me, by the way? Eye contact, right? In some cultures, having eye contact is rude. In other cultural contexts, not having eye contact is rude. Personal space. Are you too close or you're not too close? That could also impact how people perceive you. We talked a lot about professional. We talked a lot about appropriate. Those aspects also can vary greatly, right? From culture to culture, from region to region, even within the same country. So when we read this audience, and this little one read her audience very well, we need to take into consideration some gestures can be offensive, right? In some cultures. When we're trying to build trust with people, when we're trying to present ourselves as professional speakers, as somebody trustworthy, somebody worth of being listened, all these elements, facial expressions and gestures and body language, all these nonverbal cues can make a huge impact. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is a quick summary. So when we're talking about nonverbal elements, again, words are very important, but they're also facial expressions, silence. Silence can mean many different things, right? Smell, maybe I have to give it context, but if you're in the room, it could be even perfume. Very strong smell of perfume can communicate many different things. Spacing, time, voice tones. Remember how smartly this little 4 years old used her voice tone, how she lowered and posed. Body gestures again, physical distance, touch. All these elements can have a huge impact in how we are perceived and how message that we deliver with words is perceived. Next slide, please. So let's do this quick exercise. Look at these faces and we numbered them. There are 4 faces. And you can put in the chat again, what do you think these people are feeling or thinking? You can put like a number and then feeling a thing. Think about maybe emotion, what emotion they express. And then we can go into, we'll tell you what they, at least these people are. 1 disgusted, okay. 2nd, 1 anger. Anything for number 2? 6 appears distressed, okay. 6 or confused. What is be aborted? Okay, it's number 1 sad, number 2 upset, okay. 3 interested, okay. Flirty 3, this is interesting. Anything for 4 before we go to the next one? 6 surprised, confused,
I'm
surprised,
seeing a
confused.
4, Dr. Tosh, I'm
Happy.
seeing a 4 from, I think it's Ja. I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly. Bored and not engaged for number 4.
Yeah, bored, or somebody put amazed. So even in your responses, you read it very differently. There's a wide range of responses. If we go to the next slide, this is from the article, and again, we can give you reference for that. This is what these people were actually expressing. 1 was surprise, 2nd was anger, 3rd was fear, 4th was disgust, 5th was happiness, and 6th was contempt. Compared to what you were thinking. And again, this is a good exercise for us to realize that sometimes when we go to the room, now think about how you will. Okay, 1 thing is to read people accurately. 2nd thing is we communicate, right, with people depending on how we read them. You will communicate very differently with someone whom you perceive as sad or happy, right, surprised or fearful. And you will approach them very differently. And that is why, again, being mindful of that understanding that facial expressions again that goes back to body language, that goes back to physical space, can make a huge difference in how we perceive each other and how our message comes across. I have 1 more slide, if we could go please to the next one. Now Karen, also I want to build up on what Karen already mentioned. You know already a lot of these things. You study them. This table shows you how you can translate skills that you already develop online and use them in your verbal communication, being successfully utilizing verbal and non-verbal elements. For example, body language, right? With our body language, if we're mindfulness, I think, is very important to us. Knowing your audience and being mindful of how you present yourself. Understanding, being intentional in what you're using, in gestures, in your voice tone, and understanding that it has impact. Facial expression, that goes back to its emotional intelligence, right? It's how we express ourselves and how we read others. And again, we can learn about meaning of different or at least we can learn about meaning of different facial expressions, or we can at least be mindful of it and realizing that certain expressions may not necessarily mean the same thing across, or may not be as straightforward as we think. Personal space, that goes back to virtual boundaries. Like some people grow up in the cultures where it's okay to be very close. You like go to the meeting, you go to the any meeting, watch how people stand next to each other. Some people are very comfortable standing close to each other. With other people, you will go close to them and they will be pushing back because for them, larger distance is more comfortable. In the virtual space, when you communicate with different people in virtual space, you also realize that some are more comfortable with opening up. The others prefer to be reserved, and that may not and that may just be cultural. This is how this is their comfort level. This is where they're comfortable with drawing that boundary. And paralinguistic, the voice tone. Uh, I was told before sometime. I was told before that I'm too loud when I thought I was not even forget about I was not even raising my voice. I was speaking my normal voice. You're too loud in my regular voice. So how, again, even tone, right? In what perceived for some people could be loud, and loud could have, if I'm too loud, I'm unprofessional, I'm too emotional, right? That will affect how my message is perceived. If you're too quiet, oh, you're not confident, you can be perceived as not confident, or other, I don't know, whatever people attach to lower voice. So even that could be perceived in many different ways. And if we're mindful of that, if we just keep that in mind, that can help us again in building better relationships and delivering our message across. Uh, and sometimes you will be talking to people you didn't have a chance to know, right? You will never have a chance maybe to know you. It's a huge audience and you don't know where's come, who is who. Being transparent and explaining, okay, this is where I'm coming from and that's why I'm doing this, can help. I'm going to finish with a quick story that happened to me when I just started to teach in this country. I grew up in a context where every time you turn your back to someone, it's very rude. So I was teaching in the classroom and I kept apologizing to everyone every time I would write something on the blackboard because for me it was rude. I was turning my back to them. And I will never forget, there was one student, he was East European. He came to me during the break. He was like, you keep apologizing. And I totally understand. He was like, I grew up with the same thing. But, okay, people can correct me, but this is what I've learned. He said, but don't worry, Americans don't care. It's not rude for them. He told me, don't worry about turning your back. It was like this guy expressed, exuded a lot of cultural intelligence in a sense, just to warn me that, yeah, you don't need to worry and turn your every time you turn your back, it's okay to turn your back. It's not going to offend a lot of people. And I made it clear. I explained to people, I'm sorry, this is my context. But it helped tremendously in building relations, first of all, with him and with everyone else. So that transparency can also be very helpful. But at the end of the day, the biggest lesson, being mindful, understanding that our body language, our nonverbal cues can speak louder sometimes than our words, making an effort. That's part of active listening, right? To be mindful and to really understand what the message is coming from other people and what message we're trying to deliver. I'm going to, yes, speaking too fast or slow, I'm going to finish this. And we have some questions to our very own employer representative, Matt DiPiero, right? Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Matt DiPiero? DiPiero?
Correct. Very good, actually. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lamont and Karen. I'm going to go ahead and quickly introduce Matt. So thank you both so much for that really informative run through. Really appreciate it. We are now moving on to our employer Q&A with Matt. So first and foremost, of course, welcome Matt. Let me quickly introduce Matt here. He began his career in 2010 at Raytheon in contract administration management, supporting the Department of Defense radar and missile programs. And through training, experience, and mentoring, he's progressed his career to the Director of Contracts for Safran Defense and Space. So Matt, would you like to take a moment or two to say hello and introduce yourself quickly before we move on to the questions?
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you for having me, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're located. I'm glad to be here and look forward to sharing some insights or going through some Q&A. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. And so now I will turn it over to our deans to begin the Q&A portion of our presentation with you. So Karen Oman, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to start with these questions. Matt, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. So here are some questions for you. in your experience, how do strong verbal communication skills contribute to the employee's success in the workplace?
Well, so communication, from where I sit in my role, my director of contract administration here at Safran touches all different kinds of functions, right? It could be a communications or marketing lead that I work with. It could be an engineer, finance, an attorney. So having the ability to communicate to different types of, a diverse array of people is extremely important. And it comes with time and experience. But again, tailoring your message sometimes or trying to really break through to people in different disciplines with different backgrounds and expertise can at first be a little daunting. But after a while and through experience, it's a little it gets easier over time again. So it's not something that you can kind of jump into right away, but kind of that tailoring of the message or the simplification of like a legal discussion or legal terms can really be helpful when talking to, let's say, someone who's not in a similar type role as you. So really tailoring that message and knowing your audience is extremely important. And doing so, it can really contribute in getting the message across as to what you need or what the organization needs to be successful.
Thank you. So how do you assess candidates' verbal communication abilities? One thing is to use them, but how do you assess during the job application or interview process? If somebody comes, how do you know that they
Oh,
have it?
Oh, that's a really good one. So just basic questions. So I mean, one of the classic ones that I'll go with is just, tell me about yourself and your background, and just I'll let people talk. You get a lot more, in my experience, in my role, from listening than you do in kind of speaking more and steamrolling a conversation. So the active listening component is huge. And then the other question I'll ask is what brought you to apply for this role, or why are you interested in this role? And again, leave it open and let folks speak.
Thank you. This is very insightful, right? Especially for all those students who will be going to the job market and will need to present themselves in the best way. Last question that I'm going to ask before I give word to
Sure.
Karen. How
Great.
important is it for employees to adapt their verbal communication style to different audience? Colleagues,
So
clients, senior management, right? You just mentioned hierarchy.
Oh, yes, yeah. So the role that I'm in is quite interesting because I have a component where I'm either speaking with our customers. It could be a customer such as General Dynamics. It could be the U.S. government. You name it, or it could be our affiliates in France. You throw in that cultural kind of aspect to it. You got to really kind of make sure you are understanding, who you're speaking with, and also be extremely careful with in terms of tone. It could be a tough customer relationship, and you might not want to be as direct with them. And you might have to kind of soften or polish, if you will, the message. A lot of my day is spent polishing and tailoring communications. As you can assume, we have some very type A personalities in some senior leadership positions, and they might use some colorful descriptions as to things that they'd like to communicate. And it'll be up to me to deliver the message in a professional way that still gets the point across. But we also don't want to totally be walked on. It's a very hard balance. But again, to me, this is the stuff that excites me about, my role. But just in general, having that kind of tailoring and knowing who you're speaking with first, asking for a list of attendees and their functional titles in an organization can also give you some insight and clues. It's that's kind of my input on that one. If there's anything more I can clarify, always glad to do so.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. I think I'm going to take it over here from now. Correct, Lamont? Okay, Matt, thank you. That's so informative. And I do agree that it can be so helpful to know where someone is in the food chain, to know how you're speaking with them, and to really understand the best way to correspond with them. But here's a question. How do you see the role of verbal communication evolving in the workplace as technology and remote work become more prevalent? And we know that remote work has become such the norm now. I remember when I first became a remote worker, I was one of the few folks at SNHU who was remote. But then also, I would like for you, and this is kind of adding a little bit to this, so please don't be upset with me, anyone in career. If you have any insight into how AI might kind of tweak this, if you want to throw that in there, you're welcome to do so as well. So just how do you see verbal communication evolving in the workplace as we're embracing technology and remote work? Thanks so much.
Okay. No, so in terms of remote employees and the team that I work in, it's a total blend. I'm full-time in the office by choice. I have 2 toddlers, so I feel like I get a lot more done locking myself away in an office building. But I do have an employee that works from home, and then my boss is in a hybrid type role and travels a lot. So again, I mean, it's a mixed bag from what I've noticed. I started with having a teleconference line that people would actually dial into, and now we're all, using Zoom or Teams or some other application to collaborate or to communicate with either a team, with peers, with leaders. So my, what I'm seeing in terms of verbal communication, sometimes it's best to pick up the phone or to call someone via Teams. I'll see a chain sometimes of 15 or 16 emails, and my response, not trying to be flippant or anything, is I think we could have a quick phone call and save ourselves a little bit of time if we got through it. And it seems as we transition to remote work, that's gotten a bit awkward over time. A lot of people want to hide behind email, but sometimes picking up the phone or even the virtual call, I'm probably dating myself, but calling through the Microsoft Teams app, calling through Zoom directly will go way further and really enhance that communication. It also saves you some time, especially if you're really busy as you begin to progress in your career. You can't always answer, 550 or 1,000 emails a day. It's not sustainable. But I see that, verbal communication, I don't think is ever going to go away or die, if you will. I just think we have to adapt to be more open to it or more forceful with it to really help get teams together for success.
Thank you, Matt. I think that's beautifully said. I think at times we forget the loveliness of just being able to say, hey, pick up the phone, let's talk, and just say, I understand where you're coming from. Sometimes those few words can just kind of create a connection. I know working with my faculty or with students, a lot of times I'll say, let's just talk, because I agree. Instead of wordsmithing emails, constantly going through, am I saying this so that it comes across okay in an email? It's just easier for me to say, I know where you're at. I'm here for you. Those conversations are sometimes a little bit more personal. And what's happened with the embrace of social media, at times we've forgotten how that spoken word can just make such a difference. So I love that you uplifted that. And then here's another question, because you
Sure.
are expert and we truly appreciate all the expertise and knowledge that you're bringing to us today. So what advice would you give to job seekers? And as you know, we have communication majors and we have folks all across the university, but in the undergrad and graduate space who are looking to enhance their verbal communication skills. And before they apply for a job or an internship, and before they go into I would say an interview as well, what would you give? What type of advice would you give to our job seekers and to folks who are going into these environments where they may be a little anxious and could really use your insight and guidance here? Thank you.
Yeah. So step one, I'll admit that if I'm applying to a new role or even taking an interview, it can be a little nerve-wracking, but over time, you kind of come to know what to expect. But it's kind of that first date awkwardness, right? You're just meeting someone, you're asking questions, they're filling you out, you're feeling the company out too, because they also owe it to you to sell the role and make it a place that you want to be. And let's face it, we spend a lot of time at work. So you have to really want to be in that position to make it meaningful. But in terms of the advice that I would give, number one thing, develop an elevator speech. Again, folks may have heard that in the past, but you got to come up with it. It could be something along the lines of like, I'm Joe Smith. I'm a second year communications major. I'm really interested in working for this media company. I have a goal of doing X, Y, and Z, and this could be a really good fit for experience for the future, and to also attempt to be part of your organization or feel out your organization. So something along those lines. Again, I'm really generalizing, but even if it's really, really short, and think of it as something like if you meet someone on a vacation somewhere, and it's, you have kind of some light banter, and it's usually like, oh, tell me about yourself, or the dreaded "what do you do" question. And you can kind of quickly describe, I work in sales and I've been in sales for 2 years at a car dealership. Just kind of the high level about who you are and your background lightly, and kind of what you're looking for, what you bring to the table. It's really good to have that in the background.
That's tremendous feedback. I think at times we forget to be able to shine a light on ourselves and really say, I know for a long time it was hard for me to say, my name is Karen Wilkinson. You know what I mean? We have to be able to tell our own story because we know it best. So I'm going to hand it back over to our career folks at this time.
Great.
So thank you, Matt. Beautiful work. As always, we appreciate your expertise from a career lens and from your ability to see, and really share what you're seeing in the workplace. So thank you so much for your expertise and your knowledge. We appreciate it greatly. And I'm going to hand it back to career. Thank you, Matt.
Glad to share. Thank you, Karen.
Wonderful. Thank you. So at this point, we are going to open it up to some student Q&A. So students in the audience, feel free to type your questions into the chat box. We'll read them aloud for you. We have been keeping track of the questions that have been coming in order. So we'll kind of go from the first and kind of keep going on. So Matt, first question we received is, how do you know that you have someone hooked, especially in virtual meeting environments?
See that? Yeah, that is a tough one. And without the verbal cues, it can be pretty difficult. Here it's like we have a lot of us have the camera on, but in meetings, a lot of people don't either like to be on camera, they don't prefer to be, they may be sick. There could be a whole host of circumstances. So, assuming we're going by voice, you would go with voice tone, whether it's a happy tone, whether someone sounds very upset. That's really all. You have to just kind of take what you're given and adapt and really listen in.
Wonderful. Thanks, Matt. Question number 2. What books would you recommend to improve communication skills? And I'll add there if there's any sort of courses or online videos, training videos, things like that you find would be helpful to recommend.
Yeah, so for me in my role, I mean, an old book that I remember, and this was quite some time ago, it was called Getting to Yes. And it's more so a book in terms of negotiation, but little do all of us want to believe, whether or not you think you are doing it or not, you're negotiating every day. My kids do it with me every day. They're 3 and 5. They do a fantastic job. Can I have 4 M&Ms instead of 2? All day long. It starts with something as simple as that, and it could be so simple as where are we going to dinner, and you want to go to Italian for that evening with your spouse, wife, significant other. It just depends. So I think that's an effective book as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question that came through. Do you have any tips or advice on how to project your voice better when you are public speaking?
Oh, projecting your voice when public speaking. For myself, I've always tried to watch like volume or tone in my voice, but it's almost being, another avenue that I've seen, and it even came up in the comments here, is Toastmasters is a fantastic group to be involved in and get feedback. I've also taken a whole host of public speaking courses. And again, even if you're seasoned, you could feel like you could always improve. I even did one where every time someone said, they were clicking a clicker at you. There's all kinds of different ways that you can work to improve it. But if you're comfortable, you could always pick a friend, a spouse, a significant other, and kind of give your briefing or give your short speech in front of them and just get feedback. And you got to be open to it. You got to be able to take a few arrows to improve and get better, the constructive feedback, if you will.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. The next couple questions are more or less asking the same type of questions.
Sure.
So I'm going to kind of combine them here. But just in your opinion, what are some tips for having a really effective job interview? And that may be something that's when you're interviewing a candidate, something that's like, wow, this person really stands out to me. They came in strong. What's really going to help, in your opinion, make that candidate stand out to kind of elevate them to someone that you would seriously consider for an opportunity?
Sure. So, kind of number one is do your research on the company. If you were to walk in and it's, oh, this place makes toaster ovens, I would be a little concerned right out of the gate. So, knowing your company, knowing generally what products that they have, showing that you've put some careful thought and consideration into that company and organization, and then that you understand the job posting and just some of the major duties and how you could contribute. Kind of those are like the initial package of I'm starting to get interested in here. Let's see if there's any further, background information or additional kind of skills this person brings to the table out of that. So that's kind of, in my opinion, a good way to kind of hook people in, is knowing that you've done your research, because that shows that you have interest and that you truly care coming through the door. So.
Wonderful. That's really good advice. Thank you, Matt. I think that's a wrap for some of the student questions we've gotten so far. So I'm
Okay.
going to take a moment to allow my colleagues to launch a poll. So we'll take a moment actually to check in with all of you in the audience. We just want to see how you're all feeling so far. That was lots of information. So please feel free to view the prompt here, and you can type your reply directly on the screen, or respond directly into the chat. And once we get some of those replies in, we'll move on to closing out our presentation here, because we only have a few minutes left. So Matt, once again, thank you so much for your insight. Really appreciate that.
Truly appreciate it.
Wonderful. And so again, the prompt is, in a word, how do you feel about our session today? So I'm going to read a few out here. Empowered, engaged, insightful, informative, wonderful, great, better, all of those really positive responses. So keep them coming here. And as I said, we've covered a lot in our presentation today. So just want to highlight some takeaways and some action steps and examples that you can begin to think about as you assess where your verbal communication skills are. So for example, you could outline a SMART goal to help you practice your verbal communication skills. You could even think about completing a mock interview, or you can explore all of our helpful skills assessment resources on our site on Career 360. So once again, huge thank you to Matt and Lamont and Karen for walking us through today's presentation. We have come to the end of our series presentation for today. Once again, thank you all so much for attending. I think, Brooke, there's one final poll she'll be launching here. So again, if you could take a moment to complete this final poll before heading out for the day. Once again, we truly, truly appreciate each and every one of you taking the time to be with us, and we hope that it was insightful and that you took something away and learned something new. We will encourage you to please join us. We have 2 upcoming series as well as we start to wrap up our Skills Up series. So please join us. We will be talking about written communication skills next, and then we'll be wrapping things up with teamwork skills. So once again, thank you all so much for being here. We again encourage you to register. We believe we'll be adding the link to register for those 2 remaining sessions. Again, written communication and teamwork, we'll add it here in the chat. So feel free to sign up. We hope to see you there. Once again, Lamont, Karen, Matt, wonderful job this afternoon. Really appreciate it. And thank you all so much for being here. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you all.